It's difficult being a single parent, especially when you have very young children. My eldest at the time this story happened was a 13-year-old boy, and my younger child was a 10-year-old boy. Their father left a couple of years before this happened, and I hadn't been able to contact or even find him. I had to work 2 jobs in order to pay for everything, since I didn't have any child support because of this. I also refused to not provide as much as I could for my children, but that also meant that I didn't get to see them a whole lot. For the first couple of years after their father left, my sister would stay home with them while I was at work, but unfortunately she had to relocate for work herself, and this left me without a babysitter. However, my older boy was very responsible, and Lord knows I was left at home a lot when I was his age, so I agreed to let him babysit. My children rode the bus to school, and I always saw them off. More often than not, however, I would not be there in the afternoon when they got home. They were directed to go home and not answer the door or phone for anyone other than me. This process had been in place for several months very successfully when the events of this story took place. In the afternoon and evening, I work in a benefits call center, so I'm used to answering the phone constantly. This evening, I heard the phone ring and picked it up. After introducing myself, I asked the customer if I could help them. All I heard on the other end was a voice saying, "You should come home." There was a click and the line disconnected. I didn't know what to think at first. I hadn't checked which line was blinking, so I thought for a moment that I could have accidentally picked up the personal line. However, the only people who had that number were my sons and my family. I almost then dismissed the phone call as nothing more than a prank call, something that people working in call centers are used to getting every now and then. Still, I wondered if maybe I should call my sons and check, and see if they were doing alright. Before I even had a chance to, though, the phone rang once again. This time I did look at it, and indeed it was my personal line calling. And picking up the phone, I simply said, "Hello?" Once again the voice said, "You should come home." Then it clicked and that was it. Immediately I became very concerned. I couldn't think of who could have possibly been calling me. I didn't recognize the voice, and I knew it was not someone I had given my phone number to. Every weird call or urban legend started flooding through my mind, and I knew I had to call my kids and see if they were okay. Before I could call out, however, the personal line rang once again. I was hesitant to pick it up because I was sure it would just be the same thing once more. There was not a caller ID system on the phone, so I couldn't tell who it was. Slowly I picked up the phone and said once again, "Hello?" "Mom, Bobby said he saw someone in our backyard. He thinks it's Dad, but I don't think so. What should we do?" I wasn't sure how to respond at first, never having been in such a strange position before, but I told them to go into my room and not answer the door or reveal that they were home. I would call the police and get home as soon as I could. I called the police and told them what was going on. I then informed my boss and said I had to go. She told me to. I left without even thinking of signing out of my computer or anything. The whole ride home was just me worrying. It didn't help that there were like 3 police cars outside my house when I arrived. The only thing that did, though, was seeing my 2 sons sitting safely in one of the patrol cars. Sitting in one of the other cars was their father. And trying to piece together what happened, I found out a lot of things that I wish I never had to. He was wanted by the police in a different state for murdering his girlfriend. That was 2 weeks prior. Although I was relieved to know he had no intention of hurting his children, he was using them to try and lure me back home. And although he didn't admit to wanting to kill or hurt me, it was assumed that that was rather obvious it was his intention. He had the phone number because he had called the house earlier and talked to Bobby, who had answered the phone when he shouldn't have. He told Bobby not to tell his brother, but that's why Bobby knew it was his father in the backyard. Thankfully, now my ex is serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. When my oldest son was really young, he got really scared of our basement. I mean, he would actually be terrified of going down there for any reason, and it sort of came out of the blue as well. I mean, we didn't really use the basement for much at all. It wasn't a finished basement, and the only way you could get into it was outside of the house. It took up about half of the side of the house underneath. The rest of the house had a crawl space underneath it. The only things that we could keep under there were things like bicycles and anything that wasn't paper or cloth. Anything else that couldn't get wet either. When it rained, water would always get into the basement, and there was a drain for it, so it never flooded, but it wasn't an ideal basement for anything else to be put in. Because of what the basement was like, I can understand him being somewhat afraid of it. I mean, it's dark, it's musty, you couldn't see into the crawl space at all, really. It didn't bother him when he was really young, but when he got to be around 10 years old, that's when the basement suddenly became an object of terror for him. It first started when he was outside while I was working in my garden. I asked him to go into the basement to grab something for me. It was so long ago that I can't remember what it was, but I guess in the grand scheme of things it wasn't all that important. He didn't come up for a long time though. Finally, when I went to go and check on him, I saw him standing halfway down the steps. When I asked him what was wrong, he didn't answer at first. Finally, he simply asked me if I could just go and get the item for myself. He didn't mention anything about not wanting to go down into the basement, and he didn't mention that he was afraid of anything in particular. Coco Taylor may have been disappointed because she goes down into the basement all the time, but I didn't even mind. I could tell that something was bothering him, so I was more than willing to get the item. After that day, though, he would never even go to the basement door. He was constantly afraid of that basement and became convinced that the boogeyman was living down there. This was odd to me because I'd never told him about the boogeyman. I wasn't into scaring my son like that. I just figured at the time that he'd picked it up from some friends of his. In the beginning, I didn't see this as a huge deal. At his age, it was pretty normal to be scared of some creepy thing, and the basement definitely seemed creepy. I knew that it was something that he would just eventually outgrow. A few months after all this began, just the two of us were home. My son was taking a nap, and I needed to make a quick run to the store. I never left him home by himself at this age. However, he had been really exhausted, and we lived in a really safe neighborhood. I would only be gone for a short time, so I locked everything up and quickly ran to the store. When I got home, I heard my son crying. Concerned, I ran to his bedroom. I heard him but didn't see him. It turned out that he was hiding in his closet, crying. When I asked what was wrong, he at first refused to tell me. However, I eventually pried it out of him, and when I did, it was terrifying what he told me. The boogeyman living in the basement came into my room, he told me, and he threatened to kill me if I told anyone he was there. I didn't hesitate to ask him to explain. I immediately called the police. I had watched too many stupid people make stupid mistakes in horror movies, and I didn't want to be that person. The police arrived and searched the basement. They found a man hiding in our crawl space. He was a creepy-looking guy, and I could see why my son at that age would think this man was the real boogeyman. But even creepier, he had an area set up in our crawl space that he had obviously been living in. Creepier than that, he had some erotic pictures of me that I had taken for my husband a long time ago. The very first time my son had gone into the basement, he had seen the man for a brief moment. When he asked if someone was there, the man had simply replied back, "I'm the boogeyman." The creep went to jail for a short time, and an order of protection was put on him. I have, to this day, never seen him again. My son is a senior in high school, and thankfully seems happy and adjusted, unscarred by this terrifying incident. Honestly, what's more fun than the very first time as a teenager that your parents let you stay home by yourself? And I'm not talking about while they go to dinner or see a movie. I mean, when they leave on vacation or to visit relatives and they give you permission to be home by yourself for a whole week. It is hard to imagine anything else being such a moment to look forward to, at least when you're that young. For me, it was when I was 16 years old. My parents decided to go on a cruise for their honeymoon. They actually offered to take me along with them, but I had no interest going with them on a cruise ship. Actually, although I didn't admit this to them, I'm sort of scared of ships and being out on water. My mom was going to see to it that I stay with some relatives, but my dad decided that I was old enough to be by myself for a while. Mom was sort of reluctant, but my dad was able to convince her that it was a good idea. Well, the first couple of days were as happy as can be. I didn't have any friends over or any big or even small parties. It was nothing like that. I just reveled in the idea of having the house all to myself. I watched a lot of movies, played a lot of video games, walked around in my underwear after a shower, just the normal sort of things that a teenage boy would want to do. Then on the third day, though, I went to check the mail. The only thing I found in the mailbox was an unaddressed envelope. It had my name on it, but that was all. I opened it up, and it was a secret admirer card. There was no writing in it, and it was unsigned. I thought it was odd that there would be nothing written, but I didn't really worry about it. I thought it was cool to have a secret admirer, actually. Other than that, though, I put the card aside, and just didn't really give it any more thought. Anyway, the following day I was hanging out in my living room in just a towel after I had taken a shower. I heard the mailman come once again. Once I was sure he was gone, since all I was wearing was a towel, I went out to check the mail. This time there was actual mail in the mailbox. However, once again there was another envelope that had nothing but my name written on it. I opened it, and this time there was something else in it. It was like an index card, and it had an equal sign on it. So it made out a bit of a smiley face, and that was it. And much like the last time, there was nothing else to indicate who the letter could have been from. Again, I didn't think it was too weird. I just figured it was something from this new secret admirer I had, so I put it aside and once again put it out of my mind. The following day, though, things changed just a bit. This time there was another envelope addressed to me, but it was a packed envelope. I brought it inside and opened it up. What was in there was nothing short of shocking and terrifying. There were pictures of me from the past few days. There were pictures of me doing everything. Some were just of me playing video games, but others had me walking around in a towel. Some had me naked in my bedroom after taking a shower and before getting dressed. There were a couple of me smoking pot in the living room, and plenty of pictures that appeared to be taken from quite close up, meaning that someone would have just been sitting right outside my window. I didn't know what to do. I know that the immediate response most people might have is to call the police. However, I couldn't do that. There were pictures of me smoking pot, and although I didn't have to turn those over to the police, whoever had taken the pictures surely had copies of them theirself. If my parents would get to see those, there would be no telling the level of trouble I would be in. I just couldn't do it, and I figured that was the very reason those pictures were put in there, to keep me from going to the police. I did the only thing I knew I could do. I went to every single window in the house and pulled down and shut the blinds. I made sure all of the doors and windows were locked. I took a big kitchen knife and had it with me the entire time I was in the house. The rest of the time home alone wasn't horrible, but I was scared for almost the entire time. I kept expecting to get another letter from whoever this was, but that didn't happen. It wasn't so bad during the daytime, but the nights were quite scary. I spent the entire time in my home, dark and isolated from the rest of the world. I was as looking forward to my parents coming home as I had been for them to go in the first place. When they did finally come home, I was further scared that whoever had left me the envelopes would send another, but they still didn't. It was a long time before I began to feel comfortable in my house again. With my parents home, I couldn't keep the blinds down all the time, but I always felt like somebody was watching me. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. All the copyright strikes are removed now, so we can get back to business as usual. I'm sorry I haven't been posting as much lately. I've just been really distracted with Monster Hunter Rise, I'll say. But I will get back to posting normally as soon as possible. Thanks to my friend KillerOrangeCat for letting me use the stories from his subreddit in this video. He's been helping me a lot by letting me use some of his stories lately, so be sure to check him out. I'll leave a link to his stuff in the description, and he does really good scary stories as well. They're all really unique, and most of them are original because he gets them himself personally through doing interviews and stuff, so if you guys would like to send in a story or you have a story you'd like me to read, links to all of my social media will be in the description below, including links to my Gmail, Facebook, and Twitter accounts. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, the type of story it is, if it has one, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious about the art used in this video, I have links to my artist friend in the description below. He makes really good stuff and he does commissions, so be sure to check him out if you like his stuff. And as always, links to the music used in the video will also be in the description in the order which it appears in. Thank you guys so much for watching, not too many updates this time, and I hope you guys have a great day.